They say you can tell the heart of a person by what they do when no one's watching, by the small acts unnoticed beneath the hush of a falling snow. The town was a whisper that night, muffled beneath thick silver flakes drifting like frozen sighs. Street lamps cast their pale glow against the darkened windows, and the cold had crept deep into the bones of every wooden frame, every shuttered door. Somewhere between the cracked sidewalks and the shuttered shop fronts, a figure moved with slow, uneven steps. Elias Rowan carried the winter like a second skin, threadbare coat pulled tight around his thin frame, gloves riddled with holes where the chill could bite unrelenting. His breath rose in little clouds, dissolving into the night as if the cold itself was stealing pieces of him. The weight of the town's gaze followed him invisibly, whispers of scorn and dismissal curling from behind frost-lined curtains, from mouths that spoke when the boy's back was turned. No one offered warmth or words. The hungry eyes peering from frosted glass saw only a shadow. A boy with no home, no future carved from the brittle winter. The folk called him street rat in half-muttered tones, a cautionary tale stitched with bitter contempt. But Elias held his head low, footsteps steady even as the ache in his stomach grew sharper. In this town, survival was an endless winter. Survival was silence. A crumpled $10 bill, folded and worn, found its way into his palm that night. The last fragment of hope he carried. It was meant for food, a hot meal to thaw the frost growing in his chest. Yet as his eyes wandered the street, they caught something else. A movement caught in the gleam of lamplight. There, near the frozen gutter where discarded refuse lay half buried in ice, a small creature limped, barely breathing. A dog, golden fur matted and streaked with mud, its paw bleeding and trembling under the cruel weight of cold. Her eyes, amber and pleading, met Elias's with a quiet despair that echoed his own. The world seemed to still. The wind softened. The falling snow slowed as if the night itself were holding its breath. Hunger tugged at him fiercely, sharp and unyielding, yet a deeper voice whispered, urging hands toward the fragile life before him. It was the silence between heartbeats, the whisper of grace in a world that had forgotten how to listen. Kneeling, Elias brushed the icy crust from the dog's fur, the pain evident in every shiver she fought to suppress. The sound of her labored breath was a soft song in the quiet night, fragile yet fierce. His fingers trembled, cold and raw, as he tore the hem of his coat to cradle her injured paw. The warmth was faint, but a promise, a fragile shield against the dark. The $10 burned in his pocket, heavy as regret. But choice was no choice at all. He crossed the street, stepping through the biting wind toward a gas station still lit like a lone lantern. The fluorescent hum buzzed overhead as he clutched the money, eyes fixed on the few supplies, bandages, broth, a loaf of stale bread. The cashier's gaze flickered with thinly veiled amusement, her lips curling into a sneer as she caught sight of his intent. "Spending your last dime on a mutt? Ain't that something?" she muttered, voice low enough to sting like frostbite. Elias said nothing. His fingers counted the bills with slow certainty, handing over the 10 as if it were a sacrifice made at an altar. There was no room for shame in his quiet resolve. Outside, the night wrapped around him like a shroud as he returned to the dog, now shivering more fiercely in the biting cold. Back in the alley, he knelt again, bandaging the injured paw with trembling care. The dog leaned into him, a fragile trust blossoming in the winter gloom. Elias broke the broth's seal, letting the warm liquid seep into the dog's parched throat. Each drop felt like a small miracle. The simple act of nourishment, a balm for both their broken spirits. The snow began to fall again, heavier now, each flake a tiny kiss from the sky. The world outside continued to spin with its sharp edges of judgment and cruelty. But here, in this forgotten corner, time seemed to slow, as if mercy itself had paused to watch. Shadows stretched longer as Elias stood, wrapping the dog in his tattered coat. Willow, as he would come to call her, pressed her head to his chest with a fragile sigh, as if knowing this night was the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. With no place to go, no home to claim, Elias drifted through the empty streets until he reached a narrow doorstep, bathed in the soft glow of a single lantern. The wooden sign above the door read, "The Lantern's End," its letters worn by wind and rain. Maeve Hollander was a woman carved from silence and solitude, a keeper of forgotten stories nestled amidst ancient tomes and dusty shelves. She watched the boy and the dog from behind her shop window, her breath fogging the glass, hesitation etched deep in her gaze. Society had taught her to look away, to close the door against wandering souls like Elias's. But something in the quiet determination of the boy, stirred the embers of a kindness long buried. She stepped outside, her voice a tentative thread weaving between the cold. "You can stay a while, if you like." Elias met her eyes, and in that instant the winter seemed less endless. No grand words were exchanged, only the simple offering of shelter, the folding of one soul's warmth into another's shadowed chill. Inside the small bookstore, the air smelled of old paper and cedar, a sanctuary from the night's biting cold. Maeve moved with gentle purpose, pulling a blanket from a worn chest and spreading it beside the fire. Elias lay down, Willow curling into his side, her breathing soft and steady against the crackle of flames. They shared a silence deeper than any conversation, a moment where loneliness found company and despair brushed against hope. The flickering light painted their faces with golden hues, softening the sharp edges of hunger and pain. Elias whispered to Willow, voice barely audible, "Guess we got lucky tonight, huh, girl?" Outside, the snow fell heavier still, swallowing the streets in a quiet embrace. And within those four walls, a fragile new story began. One of kindness stitched between the cracks of a cold world, where two lost souls found in each other the warmth they'd long forgotten to seek. The morning light filtered softly through the frost-etched window panes, casting a pale glow over the small room where Elias lay stretched beside the hearth. The fire's amber fingers danced across his face, tracing the lines carved by hardship and quiet resilience. Willow, the dog with eyes like melted honey, rested her head gently against his leg, her breathing slow and even, a fragile peace after the night's storm. Maeve moved with careful grace, her hands steeped in the ritual of small kindnesses, brewing coffee that filled the room with warmth, smoothing the folds of a worn blanket, setting a chipped cup on the wooden table. The silence between them was not empty. It brimmed with the weight of unspoken stories and tentative trust. Elias met her gaze once, the faintest of smiles brushing his lips, as if to say, without words, "Thank you." In the days that followed, the brittle walls of loneliness began to crumble. Elias found himself lingering in the bookstore's dusty corners, among shelves heavy with forgotten tales. Maeve offered him simple tasks, stacking books, tending the fire, wiping the thin layer of frost from the windows. Each gesture, a thread weaving him back into a world that had long seemed closed to him. The soft rhythm of these shared moments unfolded slowly, like the first thaw of winter's grip. Outside, the town whispered in cautious tones. Rumors crept like shadows through alleyways and marketplaces. A woman harboring the boy without name, the street rat now a stranger welcomed in warm light. Sheriff Dalton Graves, with his sharp eyes and sharper tongue, carried the weight of the town's judgment. His footsteps echoed ominously on Maeve's doorstep one cold afternoon, his voice low and edged with warning. "You're risking your reputation, Maeve. The town won't forget what you're doing." Maeve's silence spoke volumes, a quiet defiance wrapped in sorrow. Elias, overhearing fragments of the conversation, felt old wounds ache anew. The sting of rejection, the bitter taste of unworthiness. That night, beneath a sky scattered with trembling stars, he gathered what little he owned and slipped away into the biting cold. Willow pressed close, eyes imploring, as he moved toward the empty streets. The scarf Maeve had given him, soft and scented with cedar and warmth, wrapped snugly around his neck. A silent tether to a fragile hope. The wind caught the ends, whispering promises he was not yet ready to believe. Smoke curled against the night sky, pale and twisting, a beacon that shattered the fragile quiet. The fire at the lantern's end had begun without warning, tongues of flame licking hungrily at timber and page. Elias, miles from the safety he had found, saw the glow and felt something stir deep within, a fierce, desperate ember of belonging. He ran, breath ragged and heart pounding, snow crunching beneath his boots. The world narrowed to the crackling roar and the cries echoing from within. Without hesitation, he broke the glass of the front window, shards biting cold against his palms. Inside, the heat was suffocating, the smoke thick and choking, but he moved with a singular purpose. Find Maeve. Bring her out. His arms wrapped around her slender frame, shielding her as they stumbled into the night air. But the smoke claimed him too, and he faltered, collapse seeping through his limbs like a slow tide. Willow barked, sharp and insistent, darting through the snow to alert the neighbors. Her frantic cries drew the rescuers, their faces masked and urgent as they pulled Elias from the cold ground. Maeve clung to his hand as he lay unconscious, tears tracing paths through soot and ash. "You gave everything," she whispered, voice trembling, "just to give something back." Weeks passed in a blur of sterile rooms and healing. Elias awoke, to the steady rhythm of heartbeats and quiet footsteps, to Maeve's soft smile as she sat beside his bed. The fire was gone, but in its place a new warmth took root. Not in walls or flames, but in the space between two souls who had found each other against the cold. The town's whispers softened, replaced by nods of respect and hesitant smiles. The bookstore was reborn, its sign freshly painted. "The Lantern's End, where every soul finds shelter." Willow padded beside Elias and Maeve, her once wounded paw now strong and sure. Together they tended the shop, a sanctuary for the lost, the broken, and the hopeful. Books became their language, small acts their currency, and in the quiet corners where sunlight pooled, a slow bloom of something unspoken and tender took hold. And as the winter snow melted into spring's gentle promise, Elias understood that grace was never found in grand gestures, but in the small kindnesses we offer when no one is watching. He learned that sometimes to be truly seen, you must first be willing to see, to break through walls built of shame and fear, and trust in the fragile light of connection. The fire that night had taken much, but it gave more, a chance to begin again, to write new stories on the pages of Frost and Time. And in the flickering glow of the lantern's end, beneath the watchful eyes of stars that had witnessed countless whispered tales, two souls and a dog found a home where love did not ask for proof, only presence. They say kindness costs nothing, yet in giving his last $10, Elias had gained everything: warmth, hope, and the courage to believe in the dawn. If this story warmed your heart, subscribe for more whispered tales, where small acts of love echo louder than time.